Hey guys, what's going on? This is Lucas, and if you're a subscriber, welcome back. Today it's going to be a reading vlog of the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. This is a sort of psychology slash self-help kind of book. And this being a reading vlog, I just wanted to preface this video with this clip right now of me saying, I like this book. I think it's great. I think you guys, any of you guys who are into psychology and self-help should go read it. However, there will be spoilers for the information in this book. Since it's a nonfiction book, it shouldn't be that much of an issue, but I just decided to put that there in case you guys wanted to read it yourself and just sort of experience this book for what it is. And if not, if you're totally cool with just seeing my Cliff Notes version of it, my sort of just quick impressions of it, then by all means continue. I hope you enjoy. Alright, I am currently reading Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, which is The Power of Thinking Without Thinking. Basically, it is a neuroscience book based around what goes on behind our decision making and how split-second decisions and a few distinctive decisions can make a huge impact on our lives. So this is how to sort of take the reins of our decision-making process, at least to some degree. Right now I am currently about 41 pages in, and they are talking about divorce rates based on specific key components that are in conversations that couples have. I found it quite interesting that of all the negative emotions, contempt seems to be the number one deciding emotion, deciding on whether or not the couple will stay together. In a bunch of experiments that Dr. Gottman did, he would have couples just talk to each other for 15-minute intervals about anything, and then he would have his lab workers and lab assistants watch those videotapes and every second put what emotion each participant was feeling. And so he had this huge list of emotions that go along this 15-minute video, and he also had a bunch of 15-minute videos to go off of, and he was able to determine with about 95% accuracy after checking up with these couples later whether or not they stayed together or whether they separated. And basically, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt are the three big emotions or reactions that have the largest effects on divorce.
Divorce.
It's not funny, John.
With contempt being the top, basically meaning that you are looking at someone like they're beneath you, like you have the authority to call them names, or you have the authority to tell them what they are or how they can change to better suit things. Basically, you're the helper and they're the helpee. Alright, I just got done reading the first chapter of Blink, and it continued off with John Gottman's experiments on divorce, and it started talking about the applications of thin slicing, which seems to be a theme of the book. Basically, taking a complex idea like marriage or a game or a skill and breaking it down into base components that can be instinctively recognized and utilized. And the chapter ended with another tale about doctors and malpractice lawsuits. Basically, this psychologist, Nalini Ambati, she had people look at the recordings of patients and their doctors, but she got rid of all content of the tapes except for the pitch and cadence of the voice between the doctors and the patients, so how the doctors spoke versus how the patients spoke. And she was able to determine, after gauging what people thought of the attitudes of the voices and how they thought the doctors were being, how they felt the patients were acting, Nalini was able to successfully predict with astonishing accuracy which doctors were being sued for malpractice. And it has very little to do with credentials, it seems, or skill level, because people don't like to sue doctors that they like. one of the statistics that was brought up in the chapter was towards the very end, which I found very interesting, which was that doctors who weren't getting sued spent an average of 3 minutes more with each patient than the doctors who were getting sued. And that led patients to believe like they were getting better care, even if they weren't, even if the care was the same between the two doctors. And the main predictor of malpractice lawsuits based on Nalini Ambadi's videos was dominance. If the voice was dominant, the voice of the doctor was dominant and kind of like lording over you, then that pretty much like meant that they had a lawsuit incoming, essentially. And so I found that very interesting, and I think that a lot can be said for liking a person and, going that extra mile to be nice and to have the skills necessary to do your job well, because that will make people more social towards you. I mean, we're social animals, so that'll make more people like you more. That'll make your job better for you and better for other people, and you can accrue your skills so you can have the best of both worlds. Alright, it's a few days later and I actually got back to reading Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. I'm currently in chapter 4, I think, and basically it's gone through jumping off from the malpractice incidents and being able to thin slice divorces and stuff. It then headed to territory where our brains are already set to react in a sort of automatic way based on our subconscious, conception of things. Basically, this plays a lot with our spending habits. This plays a lot into prejudices, plays a lot into how we conduct ourselves. And at first I was going to be really sad based on the neuroscience that I was reading on how our biases and our subconscious thin slicing sets us up for disaster. But then Mr. Gladwell, I don't think he's a doctor, Mr. Gladwell continued on saying that we can be properly primed to actually change these subconscious thoughts. It's weird. According to what I'm reading, you can't change the subconscious thoughts, at least not all of them, all of the time, by focusing on trying to change them. But for some reason, if you make a positive association with something and you prime your brain with that positive association, you can get rid of a bias or a prejudice or something like that you might otherwise have had if you then have dealings with something where that's important. Let's say, just for example, I don't even know if this is true or not, but just to use a neutral example, if you had a bias against people with purple shirts, right? And then you just had an automatic response to distrust people with purple shirts. The way that you can combat that is not by looking at people at people with purple shirts and then just trying, okay, changing my thoughts. The key is to prime yourself. Think of a trustworthy person who happens to be wearing a purple shirt, someone you know, an actor you admire, part of your family, etc. And if you prime your brain before that, let's say, if you try to distrust people with purple shirts and then 10 minutes out, you have to have a conversation with someone like me, to prime your brain, could look at trustworthy people who were wearing purple shirts, and that would greatly improve your chances of having things being all even Stevens. And so basically, that's what the book was saying, where it's the pitfalls of thin slicing and our automatic processes are that it helps reinforce bias, helps reinforce hate in a lot of ways. But the good thing about it is that if we did not have these, then we would go insane, essentially. If we did not have our natural biases and preconceived notions that we make of things and subconscious subroutines that keep going on and on and on and categorizing and generalizing. If we did not have those, we would go insane, or we would constantly get suckered into gambling or lying or just things that would be detrimental to our health. So as a biology student, I think that this makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint, why this would be the case, why we would need to generalize, and how we're developing at a geological timescale, but our culture is developing at a very, very rapid rate. So, at least to me, the goal doesn't seem to be to eliminate these biases. I think that's a fool's errand or a pointless exercise, given how it's been ingrained in biology over the course of hundreds of thousands of years. I think that the key is to recognize and course correct for those biases. So basically stack the dice against it. If you have a confirmation bias, basically seek out your opposing viewpoint. Things like that. So yeah, I'm currently on page 117, and overall I think the book is going really well. Alright, fourth check-in, Blink. I am currently at page 136. After leaving off what we did before, we went on to explain how I think it was Paul Van Riper, who was in the Vietnam War. They went over like some war games that he did with him and his comrades on, and determined like how intuition plays in the battlefield. And then we segued from that into what I'm currently reading, which is a study done at Cook County Hospital to determine the diagnosis accuracy and speed when it comes to diagnosing heart attacks or possible heart attacks. And basically this Dr. Riley, he wanted to work with Cook County Hospital, but he wanted to use a better way of determining cardiac problems or the advent of cardiac problems. So he enlisted the help of this one mathematician named Goldman. I don't know what his first name was, but Goldman wanted to create an algorithm that could do this, that could measure based on an ECG scan, and then after that he had like 3 questions. And depending on if the scan was normal, binary, yes or no, if any of the 3 questions were yes or no, or above or below, or something like that, each question essentially was a binary function. So it was either one thing or it was another thing. It was this or it wasn't this. The blood pressure was above this or it was below this. Riley wanted to implement the Goldman's equation into the real practice of medicine at Cook County Hospital, but they were a little bit hesitant about putting an algorithm in place of doctor's judgment. And so Riley posited a test, which they ended up doing, and for one part of the test, they would use the doctor's intuition and what the doctors thought would indicate a heart attack or the onset of a heart attack, and then they would use the Goldman equations to see if that could better predict and more quickly predict a heart attack. And lo and behold, the algorithm turned out to be the better choice. Even after years later, it seemed to be 70% more accurate than the original doctor diagnostic method. And so I found that really interesting because it's only about 4 base simple questions. And it's funny because like the initial research for Goldman, since there was some apprehension from the medical community, and the initial research for Goldman's algorithm came from the Navy, because the Navy wanted to know when they needed to surface prematurely or when they could just put one of their men in the bunk and just give them Rolaids and then just call it a day, not have to worry about a heart attack. If they didn't need to give away their position, then that would be better for them in a submarine. So they're the ones who used Goldman's equations and algorithms more than the medical community, and from what I'm reading, that turned out to be a really good move and a really good predictor of cardiac problems and heart attacks in general. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now. It's getting interesting. Alright, how you guys doing? I'm checking in. I've read up to Blink, page 182. Where are you? I actually had to record this multiple times because the first time I recorded this, it was completely out of focus and blurry. So hopefully that does not happen again. But so much has happened in the time between my last check-in and this one. Namely, something that has quelled my anxieties about what I felt the thesis of this book was going to be. I thought the thesis was going to be that unconscious behavior is something that we are at the mercy of, we are essentially the slave of, and we have to sort of just go with the flow and deal with it. But that doesn't seem to be the case. With a few more of the reports that the book gave, it really showed that the thesis seems to be turning into that expertise is not useless and your conscious decisions on things are not useless. It's just that the only way you can leverage your subconscious is if you have the proper expertise. The first report I can remember reading through was about this artist in the 00s and the 2000s named Kenna, who was objectively thought of as a wonderful musician. He played at local venues, everybody loved him, and experts of music also loved him. But when he was exposed in a vacuum, just his music alone with no context and nothing around it, he was panned by the radio hosts and panned by critics. And because of that, he probably didn't gain the traction that he otherwise would have if he were to, say, come out on Spotify now, which is really unfortunate because I did take a look at Kenna's music and it is quite nice. I recommend the music video for Free Time. But yeah, that shows the pitfalls of thin slicing because they were doing what the book called sip testing about Kenna. They were just seeing his music as opposed to experiencing it in the context that other people experience and other people love for it. Basically, they took out all of the culture and the atmosphere and the vibe. So yeah, basically the sip testing came from this other report about the Pepsi challenge, about how Pepsi was, in taste tests given to random people, Pepsi was thought to be tastier than Coke, but for people to, when people actually take the drink home or just drink a full Coke or a full Pepsi, they prefer Coke because they don't prefer that sweetness for a long period of time. The sweetness is only good in that split second, that sip test that they gave. So the Pepsi versus Coke challenge that happened, I think in the 90s, they said, was not a really good barometer for how well a soft drink does, because you're not just sipping soft drinks when you buy them, you're enjoying them and you're presumably finishing them, or finishing most of them. So I thought that was really interesting, and that was interesting to look at other things through the eyes of a sip testing lens. And it segued into another point that reminded me of when I was in art college and I was talking about color theory, because Gladwell was talking about expert tasters, quote unquote, and expert people who are in marketing, and how it relates to catching people's attention and catching people's eye and also maintaining loyalty. There are so many small, tiny, subtle things that go into marketing things like canned goods. And I found that very interesting because when I was in my color theory class, my teacher, she told us how marketers use color to grab our eyes, not just contrasting colors and complementary colors, but analogous color schemes and color schemes that evoke a certain reaction. Because you have like red that evokes a certain reaction, maybe it's passion, maybe it's high energy, maybe it's anger, something like that. You have yellow, which provokes certain emotions, and then combinations of colors provoke emotions. And then that tied into what Gladwell was talking about when he was saying how the marketers were trying to fill the shelves with things that people like, and the way they do that is by very cleverly affecting the branding of certain things. And this goes for everything. This goes for alcohol, this goes for chili, this goes for margarine, this goes for milk. If you have a picture of a farm or something that's like Royal Crown, it feels better than the product actually is, or it makes you give the product more of a chance. And so it feels like marketers are vying for people's attention by constantly just throwing out these signals and seeing what sticks as far as our split-second decisions go. And I found that really interesting. And so we're just continuing on that train, and I think the book is going really well. Alright, I'm on page 229 of Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink, and we went past the more fun parts, and we've hit sort of depressing, somber tones in the latter half of this book. I'm fairly close to the end. I have... well, how much do I have? I think I have 50 pages left. 50 or 49, something around there. But yeah, we went past different somber tones, and suddenly we're into the realm of facial recognition, which I was looking forward to reading, and I still am. But we encountered some sort of like kind of depressing aspects about issues with police departments, issues with adrenaline response, and how fight or flight responses can end up causing many, many deaths. Unfortunate and unnecessary deaths in the field, which is very sad to think about, and I try not to think about that. And it tied in one story about this police tragedy with a story about autism. Basically, I think it was Amy Klin? Ami? Basically, this doctor had a patient named Peter, and this autistic patient, the doctor wanted to see how the patient would respond to emotional movies. So he put on this 1966 movie, I forgot what it was, and then tracked what Peter's eyes were doing. Because normally people, when they are looking at somebody, even if it's on film or something, if they're in a relaxed state or in a slightly heightened, slightly aroused state, they will still look for tells, essentially, of what the other person is thinking. They'll look at their eyes, they'll look at their face, and they'll see what sort of emotion they can read off of that. But in autism, on the spectrum, that's not necessarily the case, especially as it was for Peter. Because the way his eyes were tracking, he didn't see the emotion the same way neurotypical people would see the emotion, and so it was interesting to read about that, and to read about how in a romantic movie Peter needed literal interpretations of what was going on, and literal guide markers of what people were feeling and what people were doing. And this ties into why sometimes people with autism will seem like they laugh at inappropriate times, or they seem like they give the opposite emotional response, because they're not looking at the same cues as neurotypical individuals might look at them. And it's very interesting, and I found it very enthralling to read about. And this, from what I can gather, is tying into how we react and what we tap into when our fight or flight response is activated. It seems like we start to enter a sort of, as Malcolm Gladwell puts it, a temporary autistic state of sorts, where we start to tunnel vision and care less about mind reading, care less about reading the situation in general, and that ends up causing a lot of problems, a lot of deaths, and a lot of mistakes that happen in the field. So yeah, the read is getting pretty stressful now, but overall I would say it's still maintaining my interest, and I'll check in later. Alright, I have just finished reading Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. I actually feel a bit proud. The book ended up being quite a bit more dense than I thought it would be, even though it is just basically a series of reports. Even though I found it hard to follow exactly the names of people and what they did, I feel like I am overall enriched by the experience. I will say this. I will say that this book is way ahead of its time, or it was. I believe it came out in 2007, and it is eerily poignant and eerily relevant to the problems that we've been facing as a society during COVID times and the 1 or 2 years bookending the year of COVID, pretty much. So what I would suggest that anybody who's interested in current events or political issues or issues about unfairness or mistreatment, I think they could definitely get value out of this book. This book definitely stands the test of time, and I think it's well worth your read. Even if you don't agree with some of the thesis statements in this book, in the particular chapters, I feel like the data are relevant and the situations are very applicable to problems that we face in today's society. Yeah, so I very much liked this book. It ended off on a good note, luckily. It didn't end off on that somber tone with people dying and snap judgments causing people's deaths and, us being doomed to our unconscious. Actually, quite the contrary. Malcolm Gladwell went out of his way to point out that we are not at the mercy of our subconscious decisions and that there is no need to be fatalistic about our subconscious guiding our actions, because it can be changed very easily by changing the environment around the snap decisions, around the 1 to 2 second snap judgments that we make. So even if there are problematic aspects or problematic ways that we all think in some aspect, we can change it by changing our environment and also giving things that we may not have considered previously a little bit more leeway. And he takes it a step further by saying that we sort of have a responsibility to do this, to change our environment, to help better our snap judgments, because that's the way we advance as a society. It ended with this story about this orchestra, I think in Germany, somewhere around there. And that was very sexist in the 80s, and how it eventually ended up changing because the types of auditions they would run would change, and so that they were auditioning people for the orchestra based on their merit and not based on their ethnicity or their sex or anything like that. And that has shown an upward trend and an increase in diversity, and it seems like that applies to so many things. So I think that it's important that we keep track of progress, and it's important that we do celebrate the victories, both big and small, and help other people, even those who are misguided, understand how to become better themselves. So overall, yeah, I would give this book definitely 5 out of 5 stars, and I am very glad that I read it. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I've never done a reading vlog before, so let me know how this goes and let me know how you like it. I'll probably end up doing more of these because this was kind of fun, and like I said, I feel a bit proud reading that nonfiction book. And jumping off of the Star Trek book haul that I did recently, next up on the list to read is Ghost Ship. So stay tuned if you guys are looking forward to that. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you all are having a fantastic day, and I'll catch you later.